Hi everyone, I'm Bob Polinsky, Master of Wine. Today I'm going to be opening a bottle of wine that I've cellared for about 2 decades. It's a 1998 J.J. Prum Wehlener Sonnenuhr Riesling Spatlese. Not only is this one of the top estates in the Mosel region of Germany, this is one of the best wine estates in the entire world. Aside from the tasting itself, I'm also going to provide some information on Riesling with a heavier focus on German Riesling. Also, there's going to be some tips on how to assess the quality and condition of an older bottle of wine even before you pop the cork. And also down in the description below, I'm going to list several producers, heavy emphasis on those from J.J. Prum, and they're going to be great suggestions for you for cellaring away. Riesling is an amazing grape variety. It can manifest itself in all sorts of ways, from ranging from bone dry to ultra sweet. It can be the source for some very good sparkling wines. In most places around the world, it's not made with a whole lot of manipulation in the winery. Rarely does it have any type of oak influence. Typically, it doesn't go through any sort of malolactic. It's a very pure expression of the place that it's grown in. So in that regard, it has a very strong sense of place. For me, it's on the short list of the very best of all grape varieties. So why is Riesling not more popular? For decades, I've been hearing the story of how Riesling will have its day. Well, the fact is the people that are most into it today are the Somm community and a small group of enthusiasts who absolutely love it. I'm convinced if it had some sort of French origins, maybe the popularity would be much greater than what it is today. But the benefit of this is because Riesling generally is not all that trendy in many places around the world, it can provide one of the best sources for value. Back in 1980, when I first entered the wine trade, the popularity of Riesling was actually quite strong, but it was built on a model that was unsustainable. It was mostly very inexpensive wines, and eventually what it did is it eroded the image of Riesling. Perhaps for me, there's a bit of a sentimental value with Riesling and with J.J. Prum. Back in those early days when I was working in that wine shop, Riesling was one of the first things that I was drinking. I was reading about it at every opportunity. I started with some of the very basic cheap Rieslings and then worked my way up and was eventually drinking wines like J.J. Prum, which to this day, decades later, still one of my all-time favorite wine estates. Now, within the US, the mainstay for German Riesling, the place where it's always been the most popular, has been the upper Midwest. States like Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, probably because there's a large German population. But even today, that market still has a fairly strong following with German Riesling. As for making sense of a German wine label, if you can crack the code, it will tell you a lot about the wine in terms of where it's from. It'll also give you a good indication of the quality level along with the style itself. But it's a matter of understanding what's on that label. And we could spend an entire video dissecting the way the German wine laws look. So I'm going to give you kind of a 101 version of it. But to use the wine, it's going to be opened in a bit. Here we have Johann Joseph Prum. That's the name of the wine estate. 98 is the vintage. Here is the piece where it gets interesting, is the Wehlener Sonnenuhr, which is referring to Wehlen is the name of a particular town in the Mosel. The ER at the end simply means like of the town of Wehlen. Sonnenuhr refers to the specific vineyard. In this case, it means sundial. You see there's a sundial on the label. There's quite a famous sundial that's out in the vineyard there as well. And then the other piece is the sweetness level at the time of harvest. And in this case, this wine is classified as a Qualitätswein mit Prädikat. And essentially what you have is a level of wine in which the sweetness of the particular wine is derived solely from the fruit itself. There's no sugar additions of any kind. So it's naturally occurring sugar. Within the hierarchy of sweetness levels, you have Kabinett, Spatlese, Auslese, Auslese, Trocken Auslese. There's also something called Eiswein, but we're getting off on a bit of a tangent there. There is also various styles within each of these sweetness levels. For instance, in modern times, in recent times in Germany, the making of Trocken style wines are very popular. You can find a Kabinett Trocken, a Spatlese Trocken. And essentially what that means is that naturally occurring sugar has been fermented out. The wine's going to have a higher alcohol content. It's going to be more full bodied. These are all the rage right now in Germany, and some of these are exported, but most of them are actually consumed within Germany. There's not a whole lot for the export market. This one actually does have a level of sweetness retained, and one indicator of that is on the side label. You'll see the alcohol level of 7.5%. Alcohol level is very low. What that's telling you is some of that natural occurring sugar in the grapes has not been converted to alcohol. So now you're going to have a wine with lower alcohol and some level of sweetness. That type of labeling can hold over to a lot of other examples. So here's another one, Bromberger Ufer Riesling Spatlese. The same rules apply, and you'll find countless other versions of that for German wine. Now, those German wines that are built for broad market, those that are entry-level price points, they're not going to be adhering to this type of laws. Many of them will just have some sort of brand name and more of a generic labeling. But when you get into the better estates, they're going to give you a lot of information that ties back to a very specific place of origin. If you recall earlier in this video, I mentioned that Riesling really reflects a sense of place, maybe better than any other grape variety. So with these types of wines, that information is critical in terms of understanding what you're going to get in your glass. In terms of assessing the condition of the wine, it actually begins before the cork is even pulled. There's a couple of factors that I always check, especially with older bottles of wine. One is the fill level. It's a little difficult to tell on this video, but the fill level is very good. There's very little gap between where the wine maxes out and where the base of the cork is set into the bottle. That space ideally should be less than a pinky width. Now, sometimes with older bottles of wine, especially if they've been exposed to cellar conditions that haven't been all that great, that fill level can start to get degraded. Sometimes if the cork is in poor condition, it may leak a little bit. There's some seepage. That's not a good sign. That's an indication that you're going to get the introduction of air into that headspace, which eventually will degrade the wine. In this case, the headspace looks minimal, and looking at the condition of the cork, it looks good. There's no seepage. I don't see anything oozing here. Feel the cork. It's firm. It's solid as it should be. So as I tried to extract the cork, I was using just the basic Wehlener corkscrew, and the cork actually felt a little spongy, just a bit crumbly. So I ended up using a two-prong cork puller. And this is a godsend when you have older bottles of wine. Sometimes that cork can be a little bit dicey. This one certainly was, but I was able to extract everything whole. The cork looks to be in relatively good condition. I do see a little bit of seepage in a couple of areas, so there might have been a tiny bit of it, but I believe it's minimal, and my guess is the wine is still going to be in sound condition. Let's see what this wine looks like. There is a bit of an oxidative character. You see that it has a bit of a golden color to it. A lot of wines at 25 years old, white wines that is, would have a much more deeper oxidative look to it. This is actually a touch deeper than what I expected. I've had some older bottles of J.J. Prum that have actually been very pale in color. This is actually one I had a few years ago. This is a 64 Wehlener Sonnenuhr Auslese. So this is from the same vineyard, just a later pick and some years older. This wine was actually very pale in color. In terms of the aromatics, wow, like explosive. It has this very expressive ginger character to it. There's a bit of a peach apricot character as well. It has a bit of that petrol character, which may sound a little bit odd, but it's something that happens a lot with German Rieslings and also some in other places of the world as well. It adds a whole other level of complexity and nuance to the wine. So here's what makes this wine so interesting and to me so compelling. There is a laser beam sharp acidity to this wine. It forms the backbone of the wine. It holds it together, carries it right through to the back palate. The wine has tremendous length. There is some sweetness there. And sometimes when I hear people talking about sweet wines, it's immediately because it's sweet, somehow it degrades the quality of the wine. Sweetness is just one tiny element of this wine. There's a lot of other characters going on here. The wine is beautiful in terms of intensity and breadth and length. It's really just a sensational bottle of wine. I think I have one more of the 98 left, and probably let that sit another year or two, and that'll be the end of it. In terms of the vintage, 98 is a solid year for the Mosel. It's not one of the great years, but it is definitely a warmer vintage. And with Riesling in warmer years, you tend to get a bit more of this peach apricot sort of character instead of having this pronounced citrus note. So this one has a little bit more of that peachy apricot character. In terms of the specific vineyard, Wehlener Sonnenuhr, as I mentioned, one of the classics within Germany, one of the great vineyards in the entire world. It's very steep. It hugs the Mosel River. It's slate-based. It's tough to walk up. It's actually a little bit dangerous to walk up. All the labor there is done by hand. I would imagine if you were working in that vineyard day after day, you would have calves and hammies and glutes that would be just tone as hell, because it is a tough place to walk up and down. In terms of the cost of this wine, I did a bit of a search on the 98, and it looks like it's around $75, $80. That's US dollars. That's if you can find it. The current release is more in that $50 US range. Of course, the prices are going to vary a lot by market to market. This is a relatively small producer. They only make about 13,000 cases per year, but they ship to most of the major export markets around the world. With a little bit of search, I think you can probably find something from them. Maybe not this exact Wehlener Sonnenuhr, it may be one of their other bottlings. Across the entire line, the wines are fantastic. They're great values versus a lot of the other classics around the world. And if you're looking for wines that can age extremely well, this would be tough to beat. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this video. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. It would help this channel very much. I hope you're drinking something fantastic tonight. And until next time, cheers.